What's up, y'all? Good morning, and welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. If you're rocking live with us on YouTube and you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. Say what's up in the Toyota chat as well. Love to see when it's active. If you have questions, comments, etc., keep them rolling. We will get to as many of them as we can over the course of the show. We've got a lot to dive into today. We're going to talk potential offensive coordinator options for Jim Mora at CSU now that it seems that Gordon Sammis is likely out of the equation. He is reportedly TCU bound, which is not surprising. I will play some more clips from the press conference we had with Jim Mora last week that I feel like are kind of applicable to today's conversation. We'll get into hoops a little bit, talk about what we've learned about CSU men's basketball, who certainly has established themselves as one of the top, quarter teams in the conference going into the league slate. I think they're a top 2 team in the league. I will get into that. We'll talk a little bit about bowl games, the Mountain West slate, all of that fun stuff. I did just briefly want to hit on this Michigan situation at the beginning of the podcast, because if you've tuned in pretty consistently over the last couple of months, we knew that this was going to be one of the more chaotic coaching carousels of all time. And because of that, we talked a lot about there being a real incentive for CSU to be able to make the hire relatively early in the process. And I know they went on a pretty exhaustive coaching search, 6 weeks, probably sacrificed a couple of regular season wins this year. For that, I've talked a lot about how the timing of the Norvell firing, I don't know if it did much for this team competitively this year, but it was a big advantage in terms of being able to get a head start on what is, the most important hire this program has made in a really long time, if not ever. With the way that college football is trending right now, the Rams have to get this hire right. There's so much debate and back and forth about P4 this and group of 5 that. And the reality is, as long as you have access to the playoff, this is going to be an appealing job, all the resources, all of that. But there are always bigger schools out there. There are always potentially more attractive gigs that could come open. And given how many big jobs were already on the market, you knew there was going to be some fallout there depending on what type of up-and-comers were ultimately promoted and all of that, what G5 guys were ultimately able to level up, if you will, although I'd say that tongue-in-cheek and somewhat rolling my eyes, because I think that there's a lot of jobs out there that have P4 resources, but you're destined to fail. And I can't help but think of a coach like Barry Odom, jumping to Purdue from UNLV. And I just think realistically, that's some tough sledding. That is a really tough spot to be in competitively. Michigan, on the other hand, is one of the premier jobs in college football. It's one of the biggest brands institutionally. The support you're going to get there, the fan support, all of that obviously is next level. But this situation is just so sad on multiple levels that have absolutely nothing to do with football or athletics. I do want to start with that. I don't want to be insensitive during this time, because it's kind of proving to be a sadder and sadder story by the day. I want to be careful with what I say, because a lot of this is alleged. But if even a fraction of what has come out about, Sherrone Moore proves to be true in the end, I would say he's likely never going to coach again, although maybe I should never say never, because if Art Briles can get another job, then, really any soulless SOB can in this business. But just crazy, absolutely crazy to see how all of this has played out. The dude was gifted one of the best jobs in college football, just happened to be in the right place at the right time post Jim Harbaugh. And to throw that away and get fired for cause is professional suicide, no doubt, but also just, again, really, really sad altogether. The dude's got a wife and kids and just everything that has come out in terms of him allegedly, coercing a staffer into getting an abortion after getting her pregnant, and then allegedly showing up at her house with a knife and threatening to kill her and himself, and like all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, it's very quickly turned into a sad story. So I just wanted to add all of that. I didn't want to be tone deaf to the situation at hand, but from our perspective, from a college football fandom standpoint, I do wonder if this Michigan opening could be a good thing for CSU over the next couple of years. Just the timing of it all. It'll depend on what they do first and foremost. But I think based on the calendar of it, it wouldn't be shocking if you see them go the interim route, also considering the amount of quality coaches that have already been scooped up. If, though, they were to go and hire someone like, say, Jedd Fisch from Washington, and I assume most of you know, but maybe not all of you, Jim Mora obviously is the Washington alum. If Washington were to open this winter, I kind of like that. Now, Jim Mora has already gone on the record and said a lot of bold things about how much he loves to be at CSU, how excited he and his family are to be here. He's gone on the record and says that he intends for this to be his last job, that he has everything he could possibly need to compete here. Couldn't be happier. We know all that. We also know what it's like when your coach's alma mater comes calling and they need you in a bad spot, and then how hard it is to turn down that type of scenario. I will say, I think based on how very openly Mora has kind of committed himself to CSU, it would be a bad look optically for him to bounce, this same cycle. It's not impossible. I mean, if they're willing to pay the buyout, it would be surprising to me, but not impossible. But even if Michigan doesn't open until next year and Washington opens, if Mora can have some success here at CSU, I like that. I like the possibility of that more so than like a couple years down the line. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking myself into this potentially being good timing wise for CSU, but that was just kind of my thoughts on all of it, with Jedd Fisch being linked, as a possible, candidate there at Michigan. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with all that. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Tony Alford, CSU alum. Where does he land after all of this? Does this maybe open up a path for him to be on the CSU staff for the first time? I don't know. We'll have to see, but it's crazy how all of this has played out. I will say, though, just because I naturally went through the scenarios in my head of trying to compare situations moving forward, at CSU versus Washington, and you have Big Ten resources. It's a program you've won a national title at, or that you can win a national title at. They've done it before. I don't know, though. In the Big Ten, I don't know if that's as appealing of a job as it was in the Pac-12. I think in the Pac-12, the old Pac-12, that's a top third job in the league, one of the top 2 or 3 jobs in that conference. In the Big Ten, I mean, it's not better than Oregon for sure. It's not better than Ohio State. It's not better than Michigan. There's just so much competition that you have to factor in, on top of everything that comes with the travel, which we've already seen be a factor, going both ways. The East Coast schools struggling on the West Coast, and the West Coast schools struggling, having to go 5,000 miles or whatever it is to New Jersey. I mean, it's a tough spot, but I think what was really interesting about Washington this year was they had a good season. They went 8-4. They had respectable showings against a couple of different quality opponents. I mean, they hung in there with Oregon. They hung in at times with Ohio State, Michigan. The Wisconsin losses is definitely what hurt them. They never once were really in the conversation nationally as a team anybody was kind of realistically talking about as a playoff team. And I thought that was interesting, just given the fact that they did have a pretty good season. They went 8-4. They hung with everybody. But that's what life is like in an 18-team Big Ten when you have teams like Oregon and Ohio State, and now what Indiana is doing. It's just, it's a tough gig. And I wonder if he were to look at the landscape right now and think to himself, it's my alma mater, it's a great gig. Am I actually more likely to get to the playoff and have a chance to win here than I would be there? Now, you have more money, you've got more of a budget, all of that, all of those resources factor into the equation, but it is something to consider in all of this. And I do think it's why coaches like John Summerall were very selective, with where they were going to leave Tulane from. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting how the conversation has potentially shifted with all of that. So that's a couple of thoughts. Dioso Blanco says story is crazy and sad, but 100% self-inflicted. So not like that sad. I think that's a fair perspective. I want to be clear. I don't feel bad for Sherron Moore individually. He's a dumbass who threw away a golden opportunity at one of the best schools and disgraced his family and has done a lot of bad stuff. Now, mental health and all that, you got to be sensitive of what you're saying. But I just think the situation as a whole is just sad. I mean, the guy's got young kids and all of that. That's really more where I'm coming from. I'm not like, oh, poor Sherron Moore. Your actions have consequences. Such is life, man. Such is life. Let's get into the portal a little bit here before we get into the main topic of today's show, which is what comes next for CSU football. What's going to happen with this staff? Where do you go with this OC hire after Samus is seemingly TCU bound? I don't believe that's official yet, so it's not necessarily 100% out of the realm of possibility, but based on some of the comments Mora had made in his first couple of press conferences and everything you had read, I think the writing was kind of on the wall there. Mora knew that ideally he would be able to bring some of those guys with him, but because of the success that UConn had offensively this year, he was going to be in the mix for some promotion. So it'll be interesting. We'll get into all that. We do have a portal update to get into because we are starting to get an idea of who's going to be sticking around, who is ultimately going to hit the road. There's still a lot of this that's in flux at this point, so it's not like this is it, we're done. But I will say the fact that we're now to December 12th and there hasn't been a complete max exodus is at least a little bit intriguing. There's probably going to be more guys that don't post that are in the portal and all that. But as far as big names go, it hasn't been terrible. They've lost some guys on the defensive line that I was excited about, and that bums me out. Andrew Lorich is somebody who I've been a big fan of the last couple of years. I think kind of one of the unsung heroes in the trenches these last couple of seasons. He's a guy who I would have loved to have kept around for continuity's sake. Jackson Murray, another defensive tackle out of Arizona who came on strong this season, got kind of thrown into the fire out of necessity. A young guy who probably saw the field too early, but also is probably going to reap the rewards of that experience down the line. So again, stinks that you're probably going to lose him. All these guys technically still have the option to return to CSU, but it is rarely the route that players choose once they enter the portal. So Lorich and Murray on the defensive side, those are bummers to me to lose them. We already knew obviously about Jalen Dupree and Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, who left the team in the middle of the regular season. We'll be very curious to see where both of those guys end up. But Jackson Brousseau has entered the portal. A guy you would have liked to have kept around just for his leadership and presence in the locker room. I have a lot of respect for how he handled a really tough spot. And, he was nothing but gracious whenever he had to talk with the media. And despite, criticism, I thought he was a guy who handled himself with class this year. Justin Marshall, not shocking, was kind of the odd man out in the running back rotation, has struggled to stay on the field. Certainly has potential, though. And he's a guy where if everything were to come together perfectly, stay healthy in the right system, and you saw him put up like a 1,200-yard season, it would be a little bit of salt in the wounds, but I think you understand his perspective given how everything's played out these last couple of years. A couple of other names, Mari Binion's in the portal, Jet Vincent, who's a guy out of Kansas, I actually kind of like, linebacker / safety hybrid. John Smith, young DB who really can run. He's entered the portal as well. So I'm at 10 guys publicly that I've seen post about it. Not a bad spot, though, all things considered. I think that I think that there's an opportunity here to still, field a pretty competitive roster, and a lot of that will be determined on, who you're able to retain and bring in the portal yourself. But that's where we're at. Let's take a quick breather real quick. I need to shout out a couple of our awesome partners, and then I will give a couple of names from UConn to keep an eye on. Then we will talk about who might be that OC. Hey, Colorado, I want to talk to you about our awesome partners, Dick's Sporting Goods. We are now in Dick's Sporting Goods. If you didn't know that, it's pretty surreal to think about. You can get DNVR merchandise at just about all of the Front Range locations for Dick's Sporting Goods. They have got all of the top brands and footwear. The holiday season coming up, always a good time to get the loved one in your life some new swag for their feet. Nike, Adidas Original, they've got Hoka, they've got it all. Right now, it's the 12 Days of Giftmas, which is a pretty cool promotion that we have teamed up with Dick's to do. It's every single day. We are going to pick a winner for $100 in prizes. You get a $50 Dick's Sporting Goods gift card. You also get a $50 gift card to the ALLCITY merch store, so you can use that wherever you want. Really, really cool. Get your gear fast with free curbside pickup or pick it up at your nearest store. Easy shipping from Dicks.com, because every season always starts at Dick's. I also want to shout out our friends at Game Time. Game Time has the best deals in the ticketing business today. They have the easiest app to use. I love everything about Game Time. If you are a FIFA fan, if you are excited for the upcoming World Cup and you are looking for some of the best deals around, check out our friends at Game Time. They're actually offering 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA World Cup matchups. You got to use that code FIFA. What's great about Game Time is everything, really. All-in pricing. You don't get hit with 8 million secret fees. The Game Time curation picks function makes it easy. Sometimes you're in a hurry. You're just trying to find some deals. You might be outside the stadium. Boom, it's going to show you the best of the best. You can get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. Everything is great about Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account. Redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Right on, right on. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat rocking with us live on this Friday morning. I really appreciate you guys. Good question here from the Oso Blanco. Curious what the attitude will be on letting people who left and found out grass wasn't greener back. Every coach is different. I will say there's been a significant amount of coaching turnover these last couple of years, so there's not going to be as much overlap of coaches who would be in their feelings. If it's a quality player and you have an opportunity to bring them into the program, I think you just kind of have to understand what the business is today. And then I would be willing to bring guys back that tested the portal waters or potentially left and went elsewhere and it didn't work out, like a Boom Jock, because I think Boom Jock's an NFL linebacker. I have no idea what happened at Cal, and I'm very confused by all of that. But I think in modern football, it's all business, and you got to try and put some of the personal element aside, because the reality is guys just aren't committed to schools in the same way that they were when a lot of us grew up with the game and fell in love with college football. And I don't love that. I don't think it's good for the fans. I don't think it's good for the health of the sport. I don't think it's good for a lot of the players and their personal development. But it is what it is. So that's where we're at right now. And you're just trying to build the best possible roster. On that note, some UConn transfers to keep an eye on. I will say this is not me being like, these guys are going to be on campus. This isn't sourced. This isn't a scoop or anything like that. Oh, I have the inside track. They're coming. These are just intriguing UConn players that have entered the portal who I would assume Mora would be interested in bringing over. Starting with running back Cam Edwards. Now, I do think that realistically, he's probably a tough pull. He's got just under 2,600 rushing yards the last couple years on 5.5 yards per carry, 30 total touchdowns, 26 of which were rushing. Really, really productive season. UConn's leading rusher this year. He's explosive, a good pass catcher. He's a dynamic back. I'm already seeing all kinds of reports about, P4 schools that are going to show a ton of interest in him, but we'll see, because the success that he's had under Mora, these last couple years. Maybe he wants to stay in that system. At least that's what you would hope if you are a Rams supporter. Another guy to keep an eye on, maybe a little bit more realistic, John Nader, converted quarterback, kind of a slot type receiver, but they also will get him involved on some deep shots. 24 catches for 395 yards, 2 touchdowns this past year is kind of their number 2 wide receiver. He's somebody to keep an eye on. I know somebody that UConn fans were kind of bummed to see leave. Offensive lineman Ben Morosky, he's played guard and tackle in his career, had some injuries that have held him back, and that's always a concern with a big guy with his history. But the experience is huge, and if you could bring him in, especially given you have some young guys, at least now, at the moment, we'll see what happens. They could always enter the portal. But you have some young guys in the trenches that you like to build around. And if you, hang on to Tanner Morley and Ader and Philip Ocon and some of these guys, like there's something to work with there. But he's somebody to keep an eye on, as is Diamande, the linebacker that had 110 total tackles this past season. Him and Brian Parham were basically UConn's entire defense, and Cam Chadwick, the corner in the secondary, who's also in the portal, 4 picks this year, 63 tackles and 4 PBU. Those are both guys on the defensive side of the ball that would be day one starters, highly impactful players, or at least they would have the potential to be. There's no guarantees in the portal game. There have been plenty of examples of guys who had all the right traits, had all the tools on paper, and for whatever reason, it just didn't come together. But those are guys that have been highly productive, not just trying to like project it up, but you have the proof of concept at the FBS level, I guess is what I'm trying to say. CSU's had a lot of luck with guys coming up from D2 schools, FCS programs, all that the last couple of years. That's been a big part of what has allowed them to be somewhat successful in the portal. I don't think they've been tremendous, but they have had some success there. And those are some guys to keep an eye on coming out of UConn. Will be interesting. I want to play a clip here of Jim Mora to kind of set the scene and segue into this conversation about who CSU's offensive coordinator should be. This is from December 6th, so almost a week ago. So I want that known for context. All of these clips are from last Saturday before the CU game. We haven't had a chance to talk with them since. And we didn't discuss these the last time we went live. So I just want to try and keep you guys as up to date with as much information as possible, but I also want to make sure that we're sharing everything with the proper context and all of that. I don't know what I'd call myself these days. I'm a reporter for sure, but I try and have, journalistic ethics, despite the fact that I'm more in the content creation side of things these days than true, newspaper journalism, which is where I got my start in this business over a decade ago. So here is Jim Mora talking about it being not a chaotic time, but an exciting time for him and his family as they adjust to life at CSU.
I'm going to just say it's not been chaotic. It's been exciting. It's been invigorating. It's been stimulating. I'm lucky because Colton has kept me on task. He gives me notes. He's got my schedule. So I just follow his lead. And so in terms of the chaos, if you want to term it that way, I'm comfortable with it because of the people that I've met here and the way they're helping me move through it. But we have a lot to do. Still want to make sure that I get a chance to meet face-to-face with every single player on this team and get to start to know them and their story and their background and what their goals are. That's really important to build that connection piece immediately. Certainly filling out the staff, getting to know people, around the athletic department and getting out into the community, and then attacking the portal, and trying to bring in really quality men that are good football players that can help us elevate to where we want to go, which we're going to state it. Our goal is to win the Pac-12 this year. That's our goal. And I was a little hesitant to say it the other day at the initial press conference because I'm usually not prone to making big statements like that because I usually try to stay, hey, be the best we can be today and stack those days up. But my mouth got the best of me and I put it out there, so I'm going to just keep backing it up with the work we do every day. So.
I like how genuine Mora has come off in his pressers, and obviously he's a football lifer. The guy is well-versed in media training. It would be a far larger concern if he was floundering in these scenarios than I think it is a realistic indication of success or anything based on based on all of that. But you did need the PR win, given how dejected the fans were. This was one of the more disappointing seasons, if not, the most disappointing season in modern history for CSU football. You needed somebody to come in and spark the fans. But the thing is that was such a tough balance, because you don't want it to be a situation where it's all flash and no substance. You need the substance. It can't just be sizzle. And I think Mora is kind of the perfect balance of that. Now he's going to have to prove it on the field. I just would be shocked if this guy didn't drastically elevate the floor of the program, whether they ultimately do win Pac-12 championships and compete for the playoff and all of the things that Ram fans have been fantasizing about long before even the creation of the on-campus stadium. All of that is still TBD, but the guy has murdered it from a PR perspective. And I think he said a lot of things that are really encouraging. And I just think he has a really firm understanding of what he wants in a program, who he is as a coach, and the type of individuals that he wants to put around him. So I'm going to go ahead and play another clip here, and then we'll get into Jerry Neuheisel. We'll talk about Matt Lubick as well. But here is Jim Mora on both the fluid process of evaluating a roster right now, given so much being in flux, as well as, what he's looking for in a coach, ideally what that timeline looks like, and a few other things. So here is fluid. Jim Mora.
Yeah, but I think what you like to assume is that you're going to have a chance to keep all of the players that you want to have the ability to keep. And for me, having Alex Collins and his expertise and others in the department and their opinions of those players, and just listening to them and absorbing those opinions, and then putting my own eyes on them and trying to paint the picture of who the player is fun. It's part of the deal, and it's something that I love to do, evaluate players as people, as players, but having people that understand kind of them better than I ever could just by watching film, and then having the chance to meet with them and kind of paint the picture of who they are. It's it's been good. Yeah, it's a challenge, but we love challenges.
Building staff, how much is it, maybe style and, X and O's that you want to do, and, balance with the people and, the expertise they may bring?
It's a balance, and I'm going to start with the person. We need to make sure that the staff is filled with really good people, that really care about being the best that they can be, that want to fully invest in our players, the student athletes that we coach in every way, on and off the field, that want to ingrain themselves in this community, kind of the things that I say that I want to do. We want to make sure that the staff is filled with those types of people. But it starts with good people, and then they have to be very motivated and to be the best coaches that they can be, constantly looking to learn and find new ways to do it. Great developers of talent, people that connect with their players, in different ways, and that are great representatives of this program and this school.
Ideally, when would you like to have that kind of built out?
Yesterday, yeah. Yesterday would have been ideal, but that's not reality.
Maybe
realistically, I don't know. I can't. I can't really. I don't want to put a date on it, because I don't want that expectation. The objective is to get the best people here to accomplish the things that we're setting out to accomplish here at Colorado State. So college football is very, very fluid this time of the year with all the changes at head coaching positions and the movement. The important thing is that we're very deliberate in making the right decisions for this program.
You've said it.
That's a man who's been here, done that before. That's not the perspective of a first-time head coach scrambling, trying to construct a staff. Oh, we gotta get these coaches in line. Yes, ideally, in a perfect world, you have your entire staff constructed, knowing who's coming over before you ever even sign the dotted line. But that's not the way the college football calendar works, and you don't want to hire a guy simply to hire a guy. And you have time with the way that things have changed with the recruiting calendar a little bit, with the portal period, moving to January. I like that he has taken his time in putting this staff together, and it hasn't felt rushed. And you got to see how some of these cards fall before you ultimately decide, whether you're going to push all your chips in the pot or not. Let's take a quick break. Let's shout out a couple of our awesome partners, and then we will talk about some potential OC options. It is the holiday season. Now is the perfect time to check out Aura Frames. They're the answer to every holiday gifting moment. Never struggle again to find the perfect holiday gift. I've been floundering this year, guys. I have had a lot going on work wise, but I put it off too late. I was panicking the other day, and I thought to myself, why am I worried? I can just get the loved ones in my life an Aura frame. It really is the perfect holiday gift. I've got one in my kitchen. It's a lot of fun. It's cool. You can get unlimited free photo and video. You just upload it in the app. It's super easy. Boom, they just scroll. You can have them, be set there for a minute every 15 seconds, I think is what I have it set to shift on. It's super easy to use. It works immediately as soon as you take it out of the box. It's awesome. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com. You can get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frame. It was named #1 by Wirecutter. By using that promo code DNVR at checkout, that's auraframes.com with the promo code DNVR. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now. Get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions do apply. I also want to shout out our presenting sponsors over at Branded Bills. Branded Bills have been the biggest homies over the last couple of months. I am so grateful for them to be our presenting partner here on the DNVR Rams podcast. They have hooked me up with a couple of different CSU hats that I wear all the time. I've got some on my set back there. Branded Bills, whether you want a snapback, a trucker, fitted beanies, tees, whatever you are looking for, Branded Bills has you covered with both performance and style. If you have your own company and you want some customized gear, Branded Bills is a great option for that. It's a great way to make your brand stand apart from the crowd. We have teamed up with Branded Bills, both at DNVR and the greater ALLCITY network. They do all kinds of really cool custom hats for us, and I highly recommend that you check those out. They've got a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. You're going to like it. I guarantee it. They are so comfy. Okay. Let's get into it here. I'm a little bit behind schedule, so we're going to have to kind of go double time on the second half of this show. I can rant. If there's anything that I know I can do, it's rant. But who is going to be the OC at CSU now that seemingly Gordon Samus is out of the equation? That's not for sure. I said that earlier, but I want to keep adding that. It has not been officially announced by TCU, so until that is the case, technically speaking, there is still a possibility where he could land here, especially given CSU's got a pretty substantial assistant pool to work with. I mean, $5 million to build your staff is on par with some of the smaller P4 schools out there. Again, so many people will look at CSU and they'll say this is not an attractive job because they have not won. And I understand when you look at it on the surface why you might think that. That's not a place where it has worked out for whatever reason, but it hasn't been for a lack of trying, and it hasn't been for a lack of investment or resources. And that's what made this job appealing to Jim Mora, along with the added stability of being in a conference. The harsh reality is UConn could run the table, and I still think it would be really hard for them to get into the college football playoff without having some crazy meat on the bones, along the way. You would have to pull multiple ranked wins, truly take down a giant to even have a chance. He knew that. That's why he looked at Washington State when, what's his face went to Dickert, went to Wake Forest, and it's why he's had his eye on a couple of these Pac-12 schools. He looked at Oregon State. He thinks this future conference is appealing. And then, his relationship to the state of Colorado was a big selling point for him. But if things are going to be what we want them to be, if he is going to live up to all the hype, which is increasing, every time he speaks, there's a lot of comments here in the Toyota chat about how reassured Ram fans feel, how it doesn't feel like he's a used car salesman. He has come off incredibly genuine. I will say that if he truly is a snake oil salesman in the end, and that ends up being the case, then I think the guy's in the wrong profession, because he could be a really good actor, and he should be hitting up, I don't know, Tom Cruise or something. Maybe he's got a chance to make some money there. I have two guys that I think make a lot of sense on multiple levels. He talked in that clip we played about wanting people with ideal viewpoints, also relationships, I think are a big component in all of this. And because of that, I think two guys make a ton of sense. The first of which is Jerry Neuheisel, who has a direct relationship to Jim Mora himself. The other is Matt Lubick, who has, a relationship to CSU. And both of those guys, I think, would be big PR wins. Both of those guys make a lot of sense. They've got the resume, kind of different options. Jerry more the up and comer, the young guy, the shiny new flashy coach that became, kind of a Cinderella this story as the interim OC for UCLA this year. They did kind of come back to earth after, they upset Penn State and they sparked that winning streak and they're scoring like 34 points a game or whatever it was. And then, things kind of cooled off at the end. I think the playbook was fairly limited. I'm not going to act like I sat and watched every second of every UCLA game over the, final 8 weeks of the season. I think he took over week 5. But I've talked a lot about my relationship with Tim Skipper. That's my guy. That's who got me hired at CSU football. I owe so much to him and Tom Ellers and a million different people. But obviously I had my eyes on UCLA because I knew that he could potentially be in the mix here at CSU. And I was curious, like most college football fans were, how in the hell did they turn things around so drastically? How did you look so dead in the water? Now all of a sudden you give these guys the keys, and it was like overnight he provided some type of spark. I think that Jerry, if you're going on, what he showed like schematically as an OC, it was pretty simple. I think when you're a tight end coach taking over going into week 5, I don't know how deep the playbook is really going to be. And then I think eventually after a couple of games, defenses kind of caught on to what he was doing. I mean, again, I wasn't watching every snap, done a lot of reading about him as well. I think that was kind of a common complaint from some of the UCLA insiders, is that things got a little simple, a lot of screens and stuff like that. Eventually defenses caught on. But I think that's also the product of the situation that you're in, right? And what makes Jerry an intriguing candidate is not necessarily the X's and O's that he displayed in his first stint as an offensive play caller. I think it's kind of the energy and the charisma that he brings. I mean, you see the videos of him talking to the team and, it's a great day to be a Bruin. And he is infectious. And I think kind of having a coach who is revered as one of the up-and-coming minds in college football, who has a lot of respect based on his last name as well, very similar to Jim Mora. Dad has been it's been a while since he was a coach, but is still a voice in college football. Rick Neuheisel, who had a lot of love for CSU. Remember, we showed that quote a couple of years back. But I think Jerry makes a lot of sense because he's a good recruiter, because he is a PR win in the sense that he's a trending national name, and that stuff helps, especially with recruiting and support. It feels like a win for your donor base when you get a guy who is considered wanted, by other schools around the country. And I think Neuheisel will have some options based on what he did in a successful stint as the interim OC for UCLA. I think Skipper will do good things, at Poly as well. But I am very on board with the possibility of Neuheisel teaming up with Mora. And what's really interesting, and this is reported, doesn't mean that it's 100% true, but it was reported by The Athletic, who I trust their journalistic integrity. It was reported that Jim Mora tried to replace Samus prior to this season and offered the offensive coordinator job to Jerry Neuheisel, who turned it down because he was so loyal to UCLA and had a hard time leaving his alma mater. I mean, everything you read about the guy, it's just loyalty, would have died for his alma mater. And I'm sure he's heartbroken that he didn't get the job full time. I like that, though. I like a guy who's loyal to the soil, who turns down an opportunity to potentially advance his career because he wants to do right by the place where he's been coaching for, the last couple of years, and just doesn't feel right, leaving them. I like that. And I think CSU fans should like that too. Obviously, the fact that Neuheisel played, he's a walk-on quarterback at UCLA under Jim Mora. They have a relationship that goes back. I like the idea of that as well. And then, I don't want to get too far ahead here, but I think there is an argument that really with both Neuheisel and Matt Lubick, they could potentially be guys that stick around for a couple years and are groomed to be the predecessor. Mora is an older coach, a perfect scenario. He comes in, rattles off, a couple 10-win seasons, wins some Pac-12 titles, goes to playoff, maybe wins a playoff game, rides off into the sunset as a hero for revitalizing the program. And then you don't skip a beat because you hand the keys off to a Jerry Neuheisel or a Matt Lubick, who's not necessarily an up-and-comer. I mean, he's a guy who's got 30 years of coaching experience at this point, never been a head coach, but he has been a highly successful offensive coordinator. And I wanted to hit on Lubick's resume a little bit because I didn't have time in the show where I was listing 15 possible candidates. Of course, Jim Mora wasn't one of them. I said it was probably going to come out of left field, and that's exactly what happened. But I heard a lot of snarky stuff about, like, if his name wasn't Lubick, if his last name wasn't Lubick, why would he even be in consideration and in defense of some of those people? That was more in response to the possibility of him being a head coaching option, not necessarily an OC. I think more people would probably be less skeptical of that working out than him being hired as a head coach. That's fair. This is a guy who's had a lot of success as an offensive play caller at a lot of different places. I mean, going back to even his first year at Oregon in 2016 when he became the OC there for a year, broke a ton of school records. They were top 15 offense nationally, goes on to Washington, has success there. They win a Pac-12 championship in his second year, win double-digit straight games. Like, he's a guy who has put a good product on the field at multiple Power 4 places. I think his most impressive coaching job was what he did with Brendan Lewis at Nevada. He was only there a couple years, but I mean, he got Lewis a major payday at Memphis, first of all. But he was nominated for the Broyles Award as one of the nation's top assistants because that was a Nevada team that before he got there the year before looked anemic. Didn't look like they knew how to play football. He comes in all of a sudden with Brendan Lewis, who is kind of a reclamation project coming out of CU, and that's not a shot at them. It just didn't work out with the coaching changes and everything that happened there with Carl Durrell and all that. But I mean, what he was able to do with that offense and make them relevant and have like 5 games of 400 plus yards. I mean, they were formidable down the stretch in conference play. And I felt like losing him was a big part of kind of what held Nevada back from being able to build off of some of that. Goes to Kansas. They had another successful year, kind of the co-OC there. But he's a guy whose resume has a ton of experience at premier programs. He coached, at Ole Miss under Ed Orgeron. He was at Washington with Chris Peterson. He was at Oregon back in the day. I believe that was still Chip Kelly when he was there, although I might have been post Chip Kelly by 2016. I'm old. I've been doing this a long time. Obviously coached at CSU under Sonny from 2001 to 2004. I was a wide receiver coach, coached David Anderson back in the day. He is a Ram through and through, and because of that, he is going to get a lot of love from the community, but that is somewhat of a double-edged sword. And I talked about that being a potential, I don't know if hiccup is the right word for it, but a potential pitfall in hiring him is that there is a lot of weight and responsibility that comes with the last name Lubick around these parts. Sonny's the standard. Sonny's the greatest to ever do it. Sonny Lubick was my childhood hero. I would fight you if you disrespected Sonny Lubick to me. Like that's what he means to me. And I know so many Ram fans feel the same way, but also because of what Sonny accomplished with that last name, it looms heavy and it creates borderline unrealistic expectations. And that's what always kind of scared me about the possibility of him being a head coach. And it's what I had always heard behind the scenes was why Sonny never really wanted him to be the head coach here, just because he knew the pressure that would come with that. It does sound like he came around to the idea. Maybe watching CSU suck for the last 20 years has made Sonny a little bit more open to the possibility of that. But I think either of those guys would be tremendous PR hires. I think they make a lot of sense with what they have shown as offensive play callers, but those are kind of my two options right now. Again, his OC hire could be a name that we've never even mentioned, could come, a lot like Jim Mora being hired in the first place, totally out of left field. But I think if you're going on guys that make sense based on relationships, reputation, etc., those would be my two options as your potential OCs, given that Samus is seemingly going to TCU. I keep the questions, comments rolling. I'm going to get to those. We'll talk a little bit of hoops before we get out of here. Let's shout out our final partners, and we'll keep that rolling. You know the moments, the one where you realize you left your favorite sunglasses on the slopes, at the beach, maybe on a plane or a hotel somewhere. It's devastating. At least it used to be. Before Shady Rays, every single pair of Shady Rays is backed by lost and broken replacements. Shady Rays has really changed the game. They make sunglasses that are made for real life. They're seriously good looking. They're polarized. They're durable. I have used mine in so many scenarios. In the pool, they hold up, and then, they get water spots, so I got to wipe them off with my shirt. It doesn't scratch up the lenses. Really durable. They're polarized. I'm blind, obviously. I struggle sometimes with some shades that, because they're so dark, like, yeah, the sun went away, but now I can't see anything. I feel like Shady Rays kind of have the perfect balance, especially if you have sensitive eyes like I do. They've got a style for everybody. Check it out. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com. Use the code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 3,000 people. I also want to talk to you about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, they built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there is a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the 2024 Tacoma, or 2025, Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. Really perfect for Colorado living. You've got the versatility of being able to romp around the front range and still get good gas mileage, but you've got the durability and the ability to lean on that four-wheel drive when the weather gets intense. And it hasn't been a super wet winter to this point. Haven't had much snow, but it's coming. It's always coming in Colorado, and Toyota will have you prepared for it. They've got 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They are the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Cool. I see some comments about potentially going to get Alfred. I do wonder if that could actually be in play, just given the weird spot that he's in. I don't know, though. We shall see. I'm really interested to see how the defensive staff comes together, too. I don't have a ton of names I'm going to throw out or anything like that. I do wonder if Tyson Summers being retained is more realistic than people gave it credit for. I putting that whole weird interaction that I had with him aside when I asked him if he would be interested in staying at CSU, and I think it just got taken the wrong way, both by him and CSU PR, whatever, water under the bridge. We have all kissed and made up when it comes to all that. But I mean, I don't know. I've heard some stuff behind the scenes, and I do wonder if there is a possibility that he ends up sticking around. It does sound like Trent Matthews is going to stick around, and I said that even day one, that he felt like the most likely assistant to be retained. Colorado ties as a recruiter based on his time as the DC at Mesa, CSU alum. It just made sense. I know that Tyson didn't represent super well as a head coach competitively. The product wasn't great. Also feel like he was in an impossible position. I don't think he was great at the podium. I do think he's a good defensive coordinator, and I think that the injuries made it borderline impossible for it to all come together this season. But I don't know if we have a large enough sample size to just completely dismiss what he could be here. I would give him a serious look. I really would. Because I think if you can get those defensive hires right, the chances of hitting the ground running are pretty high, especially if you land the right type of quarterback. I'd try to hang on to a lot of the personnel staff too. I know I'm probably not the most popular person over there at the moment because I was really critical all season. It was a tough year. We had to be. But I mean, I was really impressed with Alex Collins, the GM, and what he was able to do in keeping a quality recruiting class together. Nashville Fallon and those guys. I think they've done a good job recruiting the last couple of years. I don't think they are the reason that CSU has come up short. And I think there's a lot of guys in that personnel area that have a lot of value, and I do hope to see them back at CSU. Let's play one more clip of Jim Mora, and then let's talk a little bit of hoops. Again, if you got questions, comments, keep them rolling. I'm trying to make sure I scroll through here and see as many as I can. Our guy Kale, awesome producer, can always throw some up if he sees any that stand out to him as well. But let's play that clip of Jim Mora and why he feels like CSU is ready-made to compete right now.
Place has everything that we need to go win a Pac-12 championship immediately and to quickly contend to be included in the college football playoff. Structurally, support, facilities, investment, and I'm not talking necessarily about money, but yeah, money's part of it, but just the investment that I feel from everybody around in their commitment to being a top-notch football program is complete. And so that's exciting. That's really exciting. We can get there fast. I've walked into some challenging situations, and I love them, and we've had success. And the success has been because we brought the right people along and created the right culture. And it's the same thing here. There's challenges. Obviously, there's always challenges. You got to embrace those challenges. But the opportunities here are unique to what I've experienced in the past. The commitment to football is unique to what I've experienced in the past. And I don't say that in a way that's derogatory towards UCLA or Connecticut. They were both, their priorities were maybe just a little bit different, And I think, I don't want to speak for John, but I think the priority is here to be as good as we can be at everything, and make sure that we build a great football program that can maybe, lead the way to some things that open up other opportunities for the other sports around here.
He hasn't missed. Again, it's exactly what you would expect from a football lifer, from a veteran coach, but everything he has said has just been really, really encouraging. And I think that right there is very encouraging as well. I'm excited. I think he's a CEO type as well. We're seeing a lot of comments in the Toyota chat about that, letting your assistants do their job. The importance of delegation, which I do think was ultimately one of the factors that did hold Jay Norvell back, was unwilling to relinquish the play calling duties and maybe focus on some bigger picture issues holding the program back. And, pride can be a tricky thing for all of us. I know it can be for myself as well. I don't ever want it to seem like I'm trying to preach from a pedestal up here, because I'm human. You guys are all human. But I do think that they got the right man for the job, and I'm really excited to see how Jim Mora fills out this staff, who ultimately comes over with him. And I thought those comments were interesting about football support, and he's been really classy in all of this. I think he's incredibly grateful for his time at UConn, because he was out of the coaching game for a while, and it gave him a chance to revive his career. He's not going to be a guy that then, bashes them on the way out, which I love that. Nothing but class. But I do think that there's some validity to what he's saying when it comes to CSU being, football oriented and football driven, and that not necessarily being the case at places he's been in the past. UCLA back in the day, especially, I think, more concerned with where they stand in the academic world. I think that's part of the downfall of the Pac-12 as a whole, was that they got too high and mighty, too snooty, and it proved to bite them in the ass in the end. But I don't think that they were dead set on being a nationally revered football program. If it happens, that's a bonus. Yeah, they want to compete. They want to be in the picture. But, it wasn't a place that was going to do whatever it takes to compete at the highest level and try and swim in the same waters of some of their tough counterparts. And at UConn, while they have made a serious investment in football of late, it started with Mora, it's continued on this next hire. I think they're actually paying Candle more than what they were going to pay Mora, which, that was a win for CSU. If you're talking about comparable coaching candidates and what you're paying, bang for your buck, the Rams won that one, no doubt. But UConn is a hoop school. And I've said that online a couple of times, and it's drawn outrage from the Huskies fans, which genuinely doesn't make sense to me. Duke is a hoop school. So are you. That's not a bad spot. So is Kansas, for that matter. That's not a bad conversation to be in. It's great that they're competing more in football, but we know where your bread and butter is, and that's fine. The idea at CSU, I think, is to kind of have all, all the programs be in the mix. And realistically, we'll see if that can happen or not. Again, like maybe there's some of us being naive in that regard, but why not CSU? You've got the right guy. Why not CSU? That's where I'm at. I wanted to give just a couple of hoops thoughts before we get out of here. We did go longer on some of that stuff than I intended, so maybe not quite as much, but we can hit it more on Monday after they close out the non-conference slate as well. A chance to go 9-2, which is what I predicted in the preseason. If you tuned into that episode, I did think they would beat DU. I thought they would lose to Loyola on the road, who I anticipated would be a tougher draw than they proved to be in the end. MTE was exactly what we thought it would be, right? We thought they'd go 2-1 realistically, pick up a couple of top 100 wins. That's what they've done. CSU actually tied for the conference lead right now with 3 top 100 wins. A couple of teams have that at the moment. The game the other night against Dartmouth, a little bit sluggish in the first half, kind of classic hangover game coming off of a big time atmosphere, a big time rivalry win. I mean, the energy in Moby for that CU game was on another level. I think I'm going to rewatch that game this afternoon while I'm doing some writing, just kind of have it on in the background, just kind of relive the moment, because I love that, man. That's what it's all about. This team is right where you could have hoped for them to be. Yeah, it would have been great to avoid that landmine loss against DU, because you'd be 10-1 right now and you'd be feeling really good going into the league slate. But I think that we knew with how many new pieces there were, how much production you were trying to account for that was lost, from this past season. There were going to be some peaks and valleys, and hopefully we don't see any more valleys, or dips that are as drastic as that showing against DU, because that's unacceptable. But I think as a whole, they've responded really well. You took care of business at home against CU, which more or less, kind of washes your hands of it, in my opinion, at least. And 9-2 was exactly where this team was realistically always supposed to be at this point. So I like where they're at going into the league. Mountain West trending up a little bit, didn't look great in November. They've had a good December, which we needed. Picked up a couple of key non-conference wins across the board. UNM beat VCU. We saw a win over Stanford. I mean, it's been good. The win over the Buffs was big for the Rams. I like the direction that this team is trending in right now. I think my biggest riser in the non-conference slate to this point is Jace Butler. I've been talking him up basically every show. He's my kind of basketball player. He's just all effort, really savvy, gorgeous jumper, but does the little things. Good passer, great on-ball defender. Will go get a board. Just little things like that. And I think he raises this team's ceiling defensively. And I think that's ultimately going to be what dictates kind of what happens here with the rotation. We saw Ali Farokhmanesh mess around with some things, tinker with some different lineups against Dartmouth. That's what these games are for. Ideally, you're not in a competitive game and you have the ability to test out, some different combos and see, do we have any malleability here when it comes with, some of these guys in the rotation. I think JoJo McIver right now kind of going through some of those typical freshman growth transition stages. The potential is undoubtedly there. The ceiling is really high for him. You also see the inexperience. He's having trouble staying out of foul trouble, which we see almost from all young guys. Like, it takes a while to defend at the D1 level, because even if you were the man, at the high school level, there are levels to this. How many times can I say levels? In a minute, we'll test it. But there are, and I'm really high on him. But I was interested in the fact that we did see a little bit more Darnez Slater, that he got 10 minutes in that game, because I do think defensively Darnez is one of the better players. I think he's a decent facilitator as well. So I'm curious kind of what happens with those 3 young guys. I think they're all very talented and athletic basketball players who in the right setting could be very good fits. I also know that there's only so many minutes to go around, and somebody's probably not going to get to play as big of a role as they hope. How that plays out is going to be interesting. Defense, though, is what is ultimately going to buy playing time, whether it's somebody like Nicola Japa, working his way in as Bemba struggles to stay healthy. He's a guy who I really would love to see some consistency from, just with durability. It's been a struggle throughout his entire career now, which is a shame because I felt like he had a great offseason. He is an important piece of the puzzle for CSU, though. Don't give up on him. Last thing I'm going to say on that Dartmouth game, because I don't think we need to focus on it for that long. I mean, 21-point win. You did what you should do. Second half especially, took care of business. Josh Pasquarelli, 4 of 4 from the floor in this one, 2 of 2 from 3-point. He is 18 of 20 over his last 23-point attempts. That's insane over a 4-game sample size. Didn't force a single shot, though. If I come in having hit 16 of my last 18, especially after what he did in that atmosphere against Moby, I'm probably letting a few of them fly. He just continues to make the right plays, and I'm so impressed with his maturity and him not forcing it. And I would say that about all these guys. Kerry Booth, I thought was going to be a big factor in that CU game. He wasn't, but he had a really important and one scenario late. And these guys just kind of step up when their number gets called. And I'm really excited about the direction of this team heading into conference slate. We are in overtime real quick. We won't go super long. I did want to, before we got out of here, just run through the Mountain West basketball power ranking. I think it was my guy Aaron in the Toyota chat on Monday asked if we could transition. It's been a couple weeks since we've done this. Let's fly through it. There's not a ton of change, but 12 Air Force, Fresno 11. The likelihood of that changing pretty slim. I've got UNLV at 10. Nobody does less with more than them. San Jose State at 9. Grand Canyon 8. Grand Canyon been a big disappointment to this point. Nevada 7. Nevada's been struggling, but I still think they could be frisky potentially. I don't know. Alford is, I think, an overrated coach the more I watch some of those teams. I've got Wyoming at 6. I considered putting them as high as 4. I have been really impressed with what I have seen from Sundance Wicks. That team is for real. They're going to be tough. I don't foresee a sweep. I'll say that. I've got New Mexico at 5, trending in the right direction. Starting to figure it out under Eric Olin on both sides of the ball. They're intriguing. San Diego State, if they could ever get healthy, I still think they've got a lot of possibility. Played a brutal non-conference schedule, played some really tough teams, but definitely have not been the SDSU that we expected. I've got Boise at 3. They're trending the right direction. They've played really good basketball since dropping that D2 game, which was catastrophic, but fortunately for them, doesn't impact their metrics. So trending in the right direction. I still think that's a good team that would not surprise me at all if they won the league. I do have CSU still at 2. I wanted to put them at 1 after the win over the Buffs. I think that DU loss has got to count, but I will say, especially when you start to look at some of the metrics, I mean, CSU's got a couple of quality wins that are certainly on par with what Utah State has done. They don't have like the landmine loss, but they did lose by double digits to a South Florida team that the Rams kind of rolled. That game in Logan next Saturday might be the tipping point. So I'm excited for that one. Last thing I'll just say, bowl games aren't going to go away. You're going to see a lot of really disingenuous and dumb things about bowl season's going to just go away altogether. It's not. You want to know why? Because you'll still get like 3.5 million people that tune into 2 6-6 G5 teams for a bowl game, especially with all the sports betting and everything that's been a part of it. Like they aren't going anywhere. Maybe it should be condensed. I do think there's too many bowls. I've talked about that. Maybe it should be a bigger accomplishment. Maybe you should have to go 7-5. Maybe you should even have to go 8-4. Make it feel like something. But bowls aren't just going to go away because there's a market for them. They still get consumed, whether people attend in person, whether the players care about them, whether the fans feel passionate about them or not. If millions of people are watching on ESPN, if people are betting on those games, they are going to continue to happen. That's all I've got for you. Shout out to everybody. It was really cool to see how active the Toyota chat was on this Friday morning, afternoon, kind of both. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.